Hi, my name is Alicia Jackson, and this is my talk about conservation and preservation of the Tongass National Forest. I would like to begin by reading you a quote from one of my favorite poets, Lord Byron. "There is pleasure in the pathless woods. There is rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes. By the deep sea, and music by its roar, I love not man the less, but nature more." I'm going to be talking with you today about four main ideas. I'm going to start with a little background information on the Tongass forest, and then I will move into the socio-political setting surrounding the forest. I will then share a little bit of information about who the stakeholders are, and I will give a brief overview of the roadless rule. Lastly, I will explore a few potential ideas to help influence conservation efforts. To begin, imagine you are walking around through a forest in your home state. My home state is Washington. Maybe it's Oregon. Maybe even it's Alaska for you. And think about walking along the trail and learning to identify different species of plants. Maybe it's a Douglas fir. Maybe it's a cedar tree. You're able to do that because the forest has been kept in some quality, some essence of pristine condition, where there still are many species of trees to look around and identify. We would like to keep the conservation efforts in Alaska going and more in depth to a degree, so people can have that opportunity in the future. The Tongass National Forest can be found in southeast Alaska. It surrounds the Inside Passage, and it is the largest intact temperate rainforest left on Earth. It is made up of roughly 17 million acres, and it's the largest forest left in the United States. It was declared an official forest by President Roosevelt on September 10th of 1907, and 1 year later, in 1908, on July 1st, more acreage was added to the forest to allow it to dominate the majority of southeast Alaska. The main tree species making up the forest are the Sitka spruce, the western hemlock, the western red cedar, and the Alaska yellow cedar. Now moving on to the socio-political setting related to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971. This act compares to the Statehood Act because of its intention to encourage political independence and promote economic well-being through natural resource development. The Claims Act granted natives of Alaska an unrestricted title to 40 million acres. Upon receiving the land, the Alaska Natives created 12 regional profit organizations. The purpose being profit, being mainly financial, the goal being to profit from roughly half of the 40 million acres. That roughly half turned into be about 18 million acres, and the natives also, in the process, gained mineral rights to all 40 million acres. Now, the stakeholders and the Roadless Rule Act came into effect a little bit later. The main stakeholders are vast that surround the Tongass National Forest, and I will list a few, but this is not the only list. They are made up of the United States Forest Service, the Alaska Audubon Society, the Alaska Sierra Clubs, the Sea Alaska Native Corporation, the Southeast Alaska Conservation Council, the federal government, Headwater Economics, the United States Department of Agriculture, and the Alaska Forest Association. Most support conservation in the Tongass in one form or another, some being maybe more self-serving than others, profit-seeking. And that's free for you to interpret how you like. The Roadless Area Conservation Rule was adopted in 2001. The rule keeps the forest without roads and limits access to recreational users and loggers. The creation of this rule involved 600 public hearings and 1.5 million public comments. It was the largest of its kind in the early 2000s. Now, it's important to think about how roads mean access, and that can be a good or a bad thing. The roadless rule limits access to ATVs and logging trucks and other modes of transportation that require roads. Now, that can be, again, a good or a bad thing when we come to talking about establishing worthiness, and we will do that in just a second. So as we move into solutions that may influence conservation efforts, I would like to begin by saying that I would suggest that all decisions related to the forest should be made with the consideration for future generations. A great quote by Ted Martin said, We believe that travel has the power to inspire an ethos of conservation in our travelers who will return home and feel compelled to take action. So maybe some of these travelers visit Southeast Alaska, they visit the Tongass National Forest, and they feel inspired. Maybe they've never seen anything that the forest provides. Maybe they've never seen a forest of that magnitude, and that inspires them to want to help conserve it. Or better yet, go home and maybe make action in their own forest or their own public lands. One potential solution is to establish worthiness, as I mentioned a moment ago. How can people really care about a forest they've never seen or heard of? And is the forest worthy then? Do people establish some sort of value to it? And then looking at maybe what makes a forest worthwhile. Is it access? And does the roadless rule affect that? Is it a pristine-like quality that you find in areas that have roadless rules in place? Is it that limited access that makes it different and makes it more wild seeming? Is it carbon sequestration, that trees are able to pull carbon out of the out of the air, that make it worthwhile because we all need to breathe? Are we establishing some sort of value to that? Another thing to think about, another possible solution, is ecotourism. The world operates on money, so why not put the forest to use and boost local economies? Cruise ships make up a large part of port town businesses. Those cruise ship travelers come to Alaska and they expect to see pristine wilderness. And if the forest has been logged, that pristine wilderness obviously will have changed. So that in itself can be motivation to help want to keep the forest in maybe its pristine-like state, maybe a more conservation type of approach. This can be a tool, and we can use it and we can advertise it. Another solution is collaboration and cooperation. We can establish sustainable tourism. We can encourage collaboration amongst all groups that have interest or a use for the forest. Some of these groups or organizations might be tourism operators, ecologists, naturalists, conservationists, forestry members, policymakers, and recreators, to name just a few. A great quote by Robert Marshall, the co-founder of the Wilderness Society. He said, "Just a few more years of hesitation, and the only trace of that wilderness which has exerted such a fundamental influence in molding American character, it will lie in the musty pages of pioneer books. And to avoid this catastrophe demands immediate action." Now, I think this is a quote that kind of is good to ponder over, because we can be in that state now. We can be in that time period where we can demand immediate action. I like to think that you have to be the change you want to see in the world. So maybe this is that opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with that. In closing, we have discussed the uniqueness of this temperate rainforest through its socio-political developments established by the evolution of time. We have discussed the Roadless Rule Act and its direct effect on how the forest is managed and used. We have explored a few ideas that may aid in conservation efforts, and as a whole, we have examined the multifaceted approach of conservation and forest preservation and their relation to the Tongass National Forest. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.